We're now joined by independent global market analyst Boitumelo Letsuma for a closer look at today's market developments. Thank you so much for your time, Boitumelo. Even though this week it was drier than the Sahara Desert on the JSE, no company news at all. And really all we've been digesting is the tariffs. I actually want to start off there with the weakness that we are seeing in the rand. It's been quite volatile, though, a little bit range bound, but quite volatile throughout the week. What is the rand taking in terms of the tariff landscape right now?
Thank you so much, Zinati, for the opportunity to be here. Very excited. I think for the most part, the rand has been relatively high given all, at the beginning of the week, we saw it declining due to the tariff impositions, as well as what was happening with the 10% surcharge on BRICS nations. We did see it decline, and then it rebounded. It's just been like up and down throughout the week. Pretty volatile, and but it has been trading below the 17.9 level. So it seems like, from a tariff standpoint, there was a bit of like shakiness in light of the deadline, but it just seems like the rand is still remaining relatively below the 17.9 level.
A very interesting point that you make there, that it still does remain below 17 Rand 90. Of course, we know that if it gets to that 18 Rand level, then we're all going to be quite nervous. But could it be what is happening in the commodity space that's actually boosting the rand? I mentioned in my market commentary earlier on that players like Thungela and some of the diversified miners, Exara, we saw yesterday, have been posting extraordinary gains, even the PGM space and gold. So at this moment, could we say that what is limiting the losses on the rand is the commodity space? And is there actually a significant shift that we are seeing in that cycle in commodities right now?
I think that's like it's a very good way of looking at it. Today, what we are seeing is the commodities, resources outperforming, while we have like financials and other sectors. Most of the sectors are actually trading in negative territory. And it seems like the resources as well as the energy sector is holding up quite well. So I think that could definitely be one of the reasons why the rand is holding up on the back of the commodity strength of those commodities.
Yeah. Well, I know we are tariffed out, but just one last question on tariffs, because Trump has slapped a 35% tariff on Canada. There seems to be friction between the US and Canada. And could there maybe also be a worry that Canada might retaliate on the US, where it might not take this lying down?
Definitely. If you listen to what they say that Canada will definitely protect itself against the US. And unfortunately, what is happening to Canada is that it sells about like 3/4 of its goods to the US, as well as its auto manufacturing hub and other suppliers and it's also a supplier of other metals. And the US tariffs could be pretty damaging to these sectors. So it just seems like the tariff could have like dire implications for the Canadian market. And I think Donald Trump did say that he will be willing to revise those tariffs if they actually crack down on the supply of fentanyl into the US markets. So it does seem like there is room for negotiation. But I think for the most part, it's important for them to reach something that would be beneficial, especially for Canada.
Okay, well, let us go into an economy that the US does have a trade deal with, and that is the UK. We did get a GDP print for May. That's surprising to the downside, contracting instead of expanding. What position is the UK economy in right now?
So the figures were disappointing, as you rightfully said, and I think Chancellor Reeves, a lot of people are a bit upset with her for basically continuing on with monetary policy that doesn't seem to benefit economic growth. But I think mainly the drop in manufacturing output, retail sales were also very weak, and analysts were believing that. Well, analysts are believing that the Bank of England needs to actually crack down on interest rates, given that the inflation is relatively high and tax rates are also high. So yeah, it's important for the Chancellor to do right by the by its community.
I mean, listen, this is quite interesting, and it really just shows you how everything feeds into the whole landscape. Because yesterday I was actually having a conversation on the loss of investor appetite when it comes to, and loss of appetite from companies as well when it comes to the public equity market in London. So seeming that a lot of people are looking to the policymakers to make some changes. Well, Boitumelo, before we move on to your stock pick, let's take a moment to touch on some counters that your industry peers find interesting.
I would buy Glencore at these levels. It's looking very cheap. It's trading less than 7 times earnings with commodities. That can be misleading, but they've got their coal assets, which are, coal is at a depressed price. I think you've got copper and cobalt. They've got a really nice metals portfolio outside of the coal, and then they've got their marketing or trading arm, which basically monetizes volatility across the commodity portfolio that they have. So that's like a third profit generator. And I think things are going to go their way, and I think you're getting a really attractive entry point here. It is a riskier play because it is a commodity, but you're not only pegging your hat on one commodity, so you've got a bit of diversification. I think there's that new management there, which I like. I think they're a bit more focused on shareholder returns. And so I think there's an opportunity here for, if this commodity cycle gathers steam, your upside far outweighs your downside from these levels.
It's fast-moving commodities logistics group CA Sales. Recently, smallish company, recently listed, fairly good track record since 2011. Dividend growth of about 17%, like that in a small company. Earnings growth can probably be a little bit up and down, but let's say 20-15% on average, trading at a price earnings of about 14. With 10%, 15% growth, you'll get that down to 12, which is quite cheap compared to its competitors on an international basis, which is about at an 18 PE. Obviously, there is a risk because they're basically biggest businesses in Botswana, Zimbabwe is 20, also a bit of South Africa. Interesting one. They've just gone into Kenya, so they're opening up the East African market as well. And what I like about the fact that even though they are in what one consider a risky geography, with sanctions and trade wars and whatever, SADC has got to decide whether, if we can't export to the US, we should start exporting to our neighboring countries.
Right. Well, let's take a look into those stock picks. Let's start off with Glencore. I mean, earlier on, we were talking about the kind of shift that we're seeing in the cycle in commodities. And Glencore, diversified miner, holding copper, actually, that just recently had tariffs imposed. Your thoughts on Glencore?
For me, Glencore is one of those strong companies. It functions but it does function in an uncertain cyclical sector, which does impose risks during downturns in the commodity price cycle. And yeah, we've just seen like what happens when there's an uptick. So do the firms follow, and if there's a downtick, the same thing happens. If there's a downward trend, the same thing tends to happen. So, but looking at the balance sheet of the firm, it has a strong asset base, which is key for commodity companies. but its leverage ratio is relatively high, and it also tends to attract strong revenues, but it just gets squeezed on its margins because commodity prices tend to impact those margins. So yeah, when I looked at a sell-side note recently, they seem to believe that the company could benefit from unlocking value by selling its coal division. So that could potentially be something that could be appealing to investors, but it is risky, and if you're into that sort of thing, when just that volatility is imposed on your stock and you can take that sort of risk, I think it's a good one to keep.
It needs nerves of steel. Well, we have run out of time. We can't really go into CA sales, but I think Rikus did give us a lot of detail on that. Talking about appetite, what do you have appetite for today? Your stock pick?
My stock pick is Advtech, and this is a leading private education group that I believe presents a great growth opportunity in the education space. The company has maintained double-digit earnings growth, expansion projects across the continent as well. It also has a very good 10-year plan, so it's very good, like in terms of providing for the growing demand for high quality education, and unfortunately our universities and the public sector can't necessarily take up all of that demand, and just the growth in other territories like in Africa, in Ghana and Kenya, we're seeing some growth in the demand in those spaces, as well as the GDP also moves and the middle class tends to grow as the middle class grows in those countries. So yeah, I think that's definitely my my stock pick for this segment. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for schooling us, Boitumelo. Really, really appreciate it. That was independent global market analyst Boitumelo Letsuma.